recording now, Trace. All right, welcome everyone to this afternoon's session on the Design Level 1 standard. I'm Toni Maddaford. I teach at Burnside High School in the digital technology space with juniors, and then in our seniors I'm lucky enough to teach the product and digital design course. I also have with me, sitting next to me actually, Steve Rodkiss, and he teaches the game design and software engineering course. Would you like to add anything?
No, good.
No,
yeah.
cool. Yeah. So we've both been teaching a while now and have done many PD sessions on various topics. So we're just going to explain and share our knowledge of this standard today. So the purpose of today's session is to look at the misconceptions between the design and development, explore what design looks like, unpack the external assessment. We'll do a question and answer session at the end. The idea being it is recorded, sit back, listen, grab a piece of paper and pen to jot down any questions. So we think that might be easier rather than trying to chat, put it in the chat while you're trying to listen. Ideally, by the end, I'm hoping that you will have crossed out your question because I will have answered it. And you're going to buckle in for death by PowerPoint, which is not ideal, but it's probably the easiest way to do this. It is going to be a very general overview of everything we could possibly think of to help you in this standard. Right, the definitions. The first thing we need to understand is what the difference is between design and development. So I'll just give you a minute to read these. So if we look at the definitions, these two definitions, it is quite clear that there is a difference between what design is and what development is, and that is what we're going to make sure we cover today, is what design looks like so that students can be successful in the external assessment. So there has been a bit of chat about crossover between the design standard and the outcome standard. There is no crossover between the two achievement standards. I won't go through the bullet points here, but I wanted to quickly highlight just by showing the colours. So you can see design is in the purple, and there is it is only used on that design standard, the 92007. Outcome is in the green, and it does occur twice in the design standard. The difference being that I've highlighted proposed digital technologies outcome. So you are generating a design for a proposed digital technologies outcome, not creating an outcome, which is the 92005. So there is no crossover at all, and we should not see that when we're looking at the student work. There should be no crossover and no double up of student work. A couple of handy clarifications. Ākonga can design what they will go on to develop for the 92005 standard. So they can design a model and then go into Blender and actually develop that. If they are in the software they are going to use to develop their outcome, then they are developing, not designing. So it's the simplest way to keep it separate. As soon as they are in the software that they are going to create it in, they are actually developing.
Yeah.
A little bit about our teaching and learning structure here at Burnside. So I've put two timelines up of projects and how we do the standards. So if you were doing a DDDO project, so any media project, on the left is our how we've planned our year. So we spend a whole term learning skills, and then we go into designing and then developing and doing the externals. You'll note that graph there only has 3 standards because that is the directive at our school. On the right, we have the computational thinking and DDDO project. So that is our software engineering class. They cover programming, database, and a software project. Again, the whole first term is skills, and the skills with a little bit of assessment is that programming and database.
Yeah.
And then they go into the DDDO in term 2 and 3, and they also cover a bit of the external assessment for HCI in there. That can cover the 4 standards if you were only doing the 3, like last year they didn't do the actual design assessment. They designed, but they didn't assess it. So there's flexibility in there. The key points we really wanted to get across here is that they are given time to learn skills, and by giving them that time, they build the foundational knowledge, which then allows them to apply that knowledge to create art design. We keep the terminology simple and consistent, so we're trying to use the same terminology across all of our courses, and we have 4 digital technologies courses at senior level, and we all follow the similar process where possible. So I've put that little image down the bottom about understand, design, and develop. So that is sort of the process we're all following where possible. So what does design actually involve? I've split it into 3 things. It links quite nicely with the achievement standard if you break that down. So they generate ideas. It's plural, so it's more than 1. I tend to say 3. It can look so many different ways, and you'll see that. We're going to break down the different contexts soon and what that might look like. Refinement, so they're taking one of those ideas or maybe a combination of those ideas and they're exploring further, so they're going into more depth. And the final design, ideally this is at a level that is presentable. They're following best practice and it has as much detail as possible. So when we talk about best practice, you are looking at, if we were in industry, what would they expect if you were going to give them a design which they were then going to go on and develop. So that might be a schematic, or it might be like a wireframe or a mock-up, something like that. The key thing here is a final design. If I had to hand over this design to someone like Steve next to me, could he take it and then know what he's got to go and create? So that's what we're looking for in terms of the level of detail. It is handy to note before we get into designing, we explore project ideas, including brainstorming, we research, we look at manaakitanga and kaitiakitanga because that is part of the external standard. We then write a project brief, which is a proposal, and if you have done the previous standards, that was actually a standard in there, so that's sort of inherent, and that includes the need or opportunity, the requirements, and the potential users, which is required for the assessment later on down the track. Right, so we're going to look into a range of different contexts. So I've tried to cover as many contexts as possible and break it into what we would look at for ideas, refinement, and final design. We're going to go through them pretty fast. You are going to be able to come back and look at this. So if there's something that I've missed or an area we haven't covered, we could highlight that later on. So the key for all of the areas or all of the contexts is that everyone can start with idea generation in some form and everyone can refine and then they can all create a final design, but it all looks completely different. For every slide I've created, there's probably about 5 more for each of those areas, and the students, you will know that, they produce so many different ways of doing this. So this is not how it has to look, it's just an example to give you an idea. So you can see for this 3D models one, we start with sketches. Ideally, if I was encouraging the students, I'd be encouraging 3 different designs completely. The students go in a different way, where they have got one sort of idea and then they've broken that down into different components of it, and that's what they're exploring. Refinements, you can see here, it's just an example of 1, but I would expect, and I think the student had a few more, and then a final design. This is like a model sheet, which you would see as that best practice. You've got to remember as well with the refinement, and for this one in particular, you can use physical models, so foam, paper, clay, anything to be able to show ideas. So it doesn't have to be digital. And sometimes that physical aspect can allow students to really explore something that isn't easily seen on a screen. So like what a size actually looks like, or if I was going to make the head disproportionate to the body, like a bobblehead, what does that actually mean? What are the proportions? Right. Animation. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to look at this yourself, so you don't have to listen to me. Audio visual. Again, you can have a look at this.
This is actually student work.
This is all most of it is student work that I've pulled out from a range of students over a range of years, actually. So it hasn't all come from last year. Database. So we will cover this a little bit later in terms of the external assessment, but the key point here is that if you're going to do database and you're going to design a database, it has to be, students have to be able to explore ideas. It cannot be a given brief to begin with, otherwise they actually miss the opportunity to come up with those ideas. It then makes it harder for them to refine because they've been given a lot of the information, and we should be seeing an entity relationship diagram. It should not be in the software they're going to create in. So if you are using MS Access for your outcome, then they cannot design using MS Access because it has that feature in there, but it's pretty much making the outcome. Design for manufacture. So give you a minute to read that through that one. Electronics. So electronics, we are going to cover in a little bit of detail here. Again, similar to the database, it cannot be a given brief. You can do sketches of housing as well as electronic layouts. Obviously, you can refine, and some paper or cardboard mock-ups are quite handy of housing. And for a final design, we should be seeing a schematic. A components list and a final circuit diagram is all right, but ideally it would be a schematic, which would be suitable for level 1. Now, this is if they have created their idea from scratch and it is not a given brief. But if they have been given a brief, then you probably need to look at housing for the standard in particular and creating some housing. At Burnside, we don't assess the standard in electronics, and the work I've put here, the exemplars I've shown you here, is student work, a year 11 from last year, but he was a highly skilled electronics student, so he knew what he was doing. He was probably the only one in the class that could create what is on your screen. So really, the level 1 electronics assessments sit in the materials and processing area, and there is a reason for that at the moment. The standard, whilst it's in Digi, it is not really suited for electronics. There is a standard in materials and processing about sustainable practices, and that is probably better suited as an external than this one. And what you really need to understand if you're looking at electronics for this is that in most cases, students don't have the depth of knowledge required to be able to create the schematic from the start. And so you need to focus on that housing if that is the case and you would like to go down this path with them. The potential end users, they need housing. You know, everything that we have in everyday life with electronics has housing around it. So that's a good thing to be able to explore with students. And it also allows requirements that focus on the end user and the usability rather than requirements that are solely focused on the electronic components. If you were going to focus on the design for housing, you would look at the placement of like buttons, display screens, the environment it's going to be in. So is it going to be on a wall or attached to a wall, the weather tightness, construction methods, power and input and output. So this one in particular, you know, you need to really think about if you're going to use it. By all means, design. But if you don't feel like there is enough detail in there, then you just don't assess against the standard. Right, game. So you can read through this one. You'll note the final design just has a game design document, and the game design document actually covers like all of that stuff you would have explored in refinement. Okay, so the game design document, if you were doing that, that's industry standard, it's best practice, and it does cover it has a lot of detail in it. Graphic design. So note with this one is as soon as you're in the software for this, you are creating an outcome. So keep it sketches, like it is the easiest one to keep as sketches. Some of the other context, getting online and doing digital like wireframes is fine for design, but in this format for graphic design, I'd say it pretty much has to stay as paper-based. Programming. Okay, so you'll note here programming doesn't have many images because we've had a big discussion about this. I've got Steve next to me. I'm going to explain our discussion to you. Whilst programming, you could design, okay? And we've given some examples of what ideas, refinement, and final design looks like. It is not an easy assessment to do, just like electronics. By the time you write the pseudocode, and Steve wrote the pseudocode because we don't have any student exemplars for design for programming at level 1. By the time you write that pseudocode, you might as well have done the actual programming. And that's what probably in your classrooms you will find. The students don't want to design, they just want to actually program. So reality is, if you were going to design for programming, it would be a GUI, and that is not required until level 3. So there's a lot of skill that students need to be successful in the computational thinking, computer science, and programming space. Use level 1 to allow them to develop the skills. So you saw in my earlier slide with our time frame, we have students that are in software engineering and they go in and learn to program and are assessed against 9204. They learn database and then they have a second opportunity at that programming standard. And then they create a design and they develop an outcome for a website. So that's this external and then 92005. And they also have that integration of HCI within the website. And that allows them the foundational knowledge and skills to be able to go into level 2 and 3 and create an integrated program of learning for a full stack web app. So the back end, the front end, and the data. But it's easy to learn those 3 things separately. So level 1 allows the time that's needed to really embed those skills. So yes, you could do programming for this design external, but it's really not the best choice if you have another option. Okay. And we can talk about that later in the questions and answers if you've got any.
Controversial.
Yeah. Okay, website. So website, probably if you are doing website, you'll know this. It's really nice. You can do sketches, you can jump on and do digital wireframes, and then you can actually create digital mock-ups. Okay? And what is, I suppose, the difference, if you're looking at designs going, well, how do you know whether they actually did create that or whether it's an outcome, is normally the designs that they create using mock-ups look freaking amazing. And when they actually go to write their own HTML and CSS, they can't quite make it look as perfect as that. So that would be the tip for here, is that, you know, their mock-ups should look absolutely amazing. But yeah, you would know that it's a mock-up. I would also be putting a screenshot in of it being designed in like Figma. So it's really clear that it is designed in Figma and not the actual outcome. We've said you can use Figma, Adobe XD, but again, you could use something as simple as a PowerPoint or a slide to mock up, you know, slide. I would say that the best designs that I see where they do mock-ups is because it actually has content or content that is specific to the design they're creating. So you can see on examples, you know, you slowly get more detail. And in those mock-ups, it's really nice to have a heading, what the heading is, rather than the word heading in there. So obviously you can't always do that. Placeholder imagery and text for paragraphs is fine, but trying to put in some of the actual ideas for what your outcome would look like is good. Make it really clear that you've got placeholder aspects in there. I'd be like shouting that out. Right. think we're good. So we've covered heaps of context in a really short period of time and what it involves. Obviously, I haven't gone into depth of the teaching and learning and what exactly you would include to cover those things. There is this really cool website, Tequity. It has a whole lot of courses on there. It's still building. It has a whole lot of courses on there, and each of those courses at level 1 has a specific teaching and learning part for design. Okay, like a whole range of things with lots of videos and things you could explore. So it is all there for you to go and access if you are unsure. Right. Okay, we are now into the second part, which is the external assessment, and we're going to explore what that looks like. So the first part we've covered is like your teaching and learning and what the students would be doing in your classroom before they get to doing this part. This page is awesome. Whenever you can't find anything, you need to I just search NZQA and the standard number and you get this link. Okay, it has everything you need to know for the achievement standard. It's got the achievement standard, it's got the assessment specifications, it has the sample assessment schedule, okay? It also has the previous year's information, like the different reports in there. Obviously, we only had last year's. There is a 2023 for this one, but that was the pilot, so there's not much info in there, and it has changed a bit. And it also has your assessment report from the previous year as well. We're going to explore a bit of this stuff to help you out with the external assessment. So the actual achievement standard, we design a digital technologies outcome, we refine it, and then we evaluate it. So to design, you have to describe a need or opportunity, potential users and requirements. You generate design ideas for this proposed outcome, and you describe how the completed design, or as I like to say, final design, addresses the need or opportunity and meets the requirements. Now, as part of the achieved criteria, in the end note, there is the little bit I've highlighted there about how they have to include a discussion of manaakitanga or kaitiakitanga in relation to their design or their process. So how that looks is different for everyone, and we do have that material on Tequity as part of the teaching and learning. So if you're unsure about that, there is a whole lot of information to help support that. When you refine, it's about using feedback to make improvements throughout that process, and then you explain how decisions you made during that process improve the quality. So in theory, if you generate ideas, you refine them, and then you create a final outcome, and you've got some feedback along the way, you are making decisions and you are making improvements, which should make your design better, okay? And that's that level of detail that we want to see when you get to that final design. For excellence, it is just about justifying how the decisions made during this whole process can contribute to the fitness for purpose of the design. Now, fitness for purpose has come up before in our generic technology standards. We haven't seen it for a while in our specific Digi standards, but the fitness for purpose, and I've highlighted that in the end notes, is really just one that addresses the requirements and specifications and takes into account the potential users and the context. So context-wise, I'd say environment as well. Where is it going to go and is it suitable? So to give you a bit of context in terms of why we're running this PD and probably why you should listen and take on board and use like the resources they've provided, is that we're lucky enough, like really privileged, to have lots of people in our department to nut this out with. So I'm one of 7 in our Digi department. And whilst I put together this presentation, there has been a lot of conversations with Steve about programming and game, and Samuel with game, and William with electronics, and John with just, what you need to know in this presentation. For this standard in particular, there are 2 courses that look at this standard, and there are 4 of us that are teaching it. So we've got product and digital design with myself and John, and game design with Samuel and Steve. We all follow the design stage that we covered earlier, but in our own way and obviously suited to the context. Game design, everyone in the class is doing game design and designing for game, and product and digital design, everyone is doing their own project. And out of those contexts, we have a huge range. I will point out, I've put the results there, and it's just highlighting the results nationally and then what our results were. We were probably pretty surprised. We went in, you always go in wondering. It was new last year with the way the format was and the exam. We were unsure of whether we had prepared the students well enough or not. So our indication with our results there would be that we did cover it well enough. I have put our number of students in, so we're talking about 80 students that sat this, which is really good. The key points for us is that our not achieve rate is lower than the national, and you'll note that's quite high, that national not achieve rate, and that our excellence is higher. So that's quite good for us. Wanted to point out that in product and digital design, we had a big focus on the design side of things. And John and I really identified that, in general, DT, we don't design very well. Students just come in and they want to create. And so we do need to focus a little bit on that design side and maybe bring in some of those other technology skills that you see, like in DVC in particular. And so we worked quite hard on what design would look like in the context, which sort of is that overview I gave you, and really telling students that they had to be designing before they were creating the outcome and that they couldn't be in the software. We have a lot of students in our course that do the design for manufacturing and they just want to jump into Fusion and design in Fusion, but obviously, those lines are blurred then with what is design and what is outcome, and really they're just creating their outcome. So we had a big focus on this. I haven't put it up here, but I will tell you that when I actually broke down our results for our product and digital design course, we had 23.5% achieve excellence. So we had quite a lot higher in that. And in game design, it was slightly lower than the national at 10.9%. So quite a bit of a difference. We have talked a bit about how game maybe they don't do so much of the sketching side of things. They do the game design document. It's very written, but maybe, and from industry standard, that's what you would hand over, and then you would hire a concept artist to actually come up with the concept for the art. But when we're teaching this, the students are actually going on to create their game themselves. So they do need to have an understanding of what it could look like. And so doing some of those initial sketches to support their game design document is helpful. And that would actually probably help them bump up sort of their results as well. Right, so that's the context. Now we're going to look at the external itself and what it looked like last year and then what it looks like this year. So last year, it was an external exam run internally and it was submitted to NCEA by October. So you could run it when it suited you. It was recommended no more than 4 hours, but obviously you were monitoring that in class. A range of questions were asked relating to the achievement standard. They were asked to include 5 images. There was no support, no teacher support allowed during the exam, and schools were provided with the following to give their students. And I've linked in the candidate information, which doesn't tell you much, but that is what was provided to the students as well. I have put on here exemplars. Hopefully my QR code works and goes to the right place. So I've put in some of our exemplars. I'm not going to open them up because you can have a look in your own time for this. You'll note in the folder is a spreadsheet where I've put the exemplars I've given you, the grade they got. So they have a cut score there because actually, if you didn't realize, the students are given their cut score when they go online and they click on the actual standard, it tells them their score. If you're not familiar with cut scores, then 1 and 2 are not achieved, 3 and 4 are achieved, 5 and 6 are merit, and 7 and 8 are excellence. So there's some notes. I've tried to have a look, and from my opinion what their grade, why they got that grade. Obviously, we have a bit of inside knowledge, like there are a couple there that, one in particular, the 04, they achieved, very low literacy student, but you can see passed and passed like a solid pass. So, it's an opportunity for students to succeed when maybe in other areas they don't. I have included at the bottom, there is a blank exam from last year. So if you just want to look at the questions and not have to worry about all the writing and imagery, that's there. And I've also included the candidate information as well. So that's all there. Right, don't want to spend too much time on this because obviously the format this year is different. So this year, I've put the link into the assessment specifications. You are going to, the students are going to digitally submit a mini portfolio, a digital mini portfolio. All the design work is completed before they put together this external. So we would do our teaching and learning for that 4 weeks, and then they're going to sit this. Submissions open in term 2, somewhere near the start. We haven't got a date yet, but that is what has been indicated by NCEA, and they have specifically said the final date for submission is the 12th of September, so the end of week 9, term 3. When they have, NCEA have said that they are releasing the submission info on the standard plus the level 2 DCAT and level 3 DCAT early in term 2. The students and we as teachers are encouraged to collate and get this external done as for their mini portfolio as soon as the design, teaching and learning is completed. And that also means that you're not going to have that worry about overlap in students, including outcome info. And it is recommended to spend no more than 3 hours of class time to individually collate their mini portfolio for the submission under teacher supervision. So 3 hours, I reckon, more than enough. We always have a working doc or like Steve's game design document or whatever you are collating the work in or showing your work in. And essentially they're just taking from that and putting some images in and then writing some answers. So look at the assessment specifications. I've pulled out the key info that you need to know, but the specifications have lots more info and help in terms of what this looks like. I have created a template, so you have got access to this template. On the specifications, they have talked about a limit of pages, and I think it was 6A3 and 10A4 or something like that. I've created 2 templates, one for A4, one for A3, so you're more than welcome to use those. You need to realise NCEA do not like highly scaffolded work, so when you look at this template, it is very basic. It's got a couple of general headings and there are no questions in there. And really this has come from seeing students having to create templates, and actually some of them are not very skilled in presentations or slides or, putting a heading in, and actually they spend more time doing that than putting the evidence in. So just something really basic to get them started. We're assuming skills will be provided with an assessment task, which will include what I've put on the right there, and that comes from the assessment specifications. So it tells you what, in the bullet points, those first lot of bullet points, what should be included, and that really is just from the achievement standard. And it also tells you that they need to include a minimum of 3 different images. Last year it was 5, this year it's 3. They've been pretty specific there. So final design, design ideas, and something about refining their design. Last year for the materials and processing task, NCEA provided an assessment task, and I have linked that in there for you to have a look at. And the assessment task for that had information similar to, what I'm saying we would expect to see based on our information. You need to really realise I've given you a template. Our students will be using this, but out of our 80 exams, no 2 look the same. Even with this basic template provided, none of ours will look the same. The evidence is all going to be different. You can see from those contexts, it all looks different. It's tempting as a teacher to put more help in there, but you're really disadvantaging the students. It should be coming from them. That makes it authentic. It means everyone is on a level playing field. There is no heading for Manaakitanga and Kaitiakitanga, and I'm going to talk about this shortly about the assessment report, but there is a comment in the assessment report, and that is why there is no heading. It should be included where it fits in, and that can be different based on the students and where they feel that this evidence has been shown. And do what we did, take your 2024 exams and convert them into this format as exemplars. So in that folder, I've put one in there. I'll try and get another one in there. Our lovely student Gertrude, I asked her if she could basically take her exam from last year and put it in this format. And the evidence in there is actually just her evidence from her exam. The only thing different is she's gone and sort of put a little bit of design into it to make it hers. So that's a good way, because obviously there's no exemplars for this. So, you could do that, but I wouldn't be putting too much detail in there. You want the students to be able to really put their own take on these templates. And you will see, like, if you think that's not very much space, like 6A3s, there's heaps of room, like tons of stuff. Actually, we only used 5 for Gertrude's, I think, and there's, lots of room in there. So again, not having to fill all the pages, just making sure what's covered is covered very well. And, you want to be succinct. Right, so my tips for success is authentic projects. The more you can do this and encourage this, the easier it is for students to be successful. You definitely should read the assessment reports. Like, there is so much good information that in there, and the commentary at the start, it has the bullet points and breaks down what achieved looks like, what merit looks like, etc. But that commentary at the start sort of talks about where there were issues or good things. The very high national not achieved result that I mentioned earlier of 32.8 is explained in that very first paragraph. So that first paragraph talks about how we and students didn't understand the difference between design and develop, and that they are not the same. So hence my clarification. They are different. There is no overlap. And that many responses focused on the outcome rather than discussing the design. Second paragraph highlights what a final design should look like and how it should have the detail. So again, coming back to best practice, and if I was going to hand over my design to Steve to go and make, can he make it? Can he start to make it? Does it give him enough info to get started? They do talk about how it should include how it should look and how it should work. Okay. If students aren't really good at designing, and we probably didn't cover that very well, is reference images. Put in reference images to show what they are trying to do, but make it really clear this is a reference image of texture, and this is the texture that sort of the idea that would be applied. The third paragraph there, authentic projects. So they bring that up. They actually relate back to that literacy side of things. So being able to describe, explain, and justify across the range of responses is better when the students have worked through an authentic project and process, because they understand what they have done. Okay. They do mention the database and the programming, and addressing the given brief means that they didn't actually get to explore ideas. So I was told, and this is what I'm doing, and so there's no refinement either. Fourth paragraph, user requirements. What are they? Okay, so having a look at what user requirements actually are for your context, and there is a difference between requirements to make the design or the outcome successful versus user requirements. Okay, because some of that is in the behind the scenes that students would need to think about that the user doesn't see, but it means, from a user point of view, it's easy to use. Okay. The fifth paragraph there, the sufficient images. One of our exemplars I've put in there for the animation. I did feel like imagery, like they've got a merit and it's solid. But when you look at that one in particular, you'll note that the imagery that is provided is quite limited. And so there's a bit of repetition that starts to happen. The responses start to get repeated, so enough to get to a merit. But when I looked at the excellence criteria and their responses, it's a lot of repetition because there just wasn't that depth. So actually going through that process again of ideation and ideas and then refining and then having a final means that they actually have that range to be able to talk about. So we're not getting that repetitiveness. And then that EN2, addressing manaakitanga or kaitiakitanga, they've talked about it being answered poorly. They gave one example. They talked about it relating to the content of the design rather than actually the design itself or the process. And they were after students giving them multiple examples. So hence, there's no heading for it because in the exam, it was an exam question. And so everyone puts a response in, but whether it's actually authentic or not is it. So by not having it as a heading in there, the students actually have to work out where to put it in, okay? And that probably helps with that authenticness. They have to really think about where it was shown and how they're going to answer that. After that one, the context with the shortcomings, so database, hence what we've talked about. 3D models, they've pinpointed that 3D models were also an issue because if you want to create 3D models, then they need to be like ideas and sketching because they were created in the software from the get-go. So really quick summary of that assessment report, but go in and read it because it has so much info in there. The type of outcome being designed needs to have enough scope to allow the depth required at level 6 of the curriculum. So there has been chat on the forum about the specifications with a note in there about a simple poster or logo not being sufficient. I would, when I read that, I read it as simple, as in you can't do a poster, but that it is, if they're simple, then that's not sufficient enough. I would stay away from logos. I understand you can go into depth with logos, but if we're looking at time, we're spending 4 weeks on design and we're spending 12 weeks in development. What are they developing for 12 weeks when you come to a logo? I would suggest a logo is not sufficient, but a poster, as long as it has that depth. So, they're actually thinking about the imagery and they're going to create the imagery themselves. They're looking at topography and they're actually not just putting, a header on a page with a text that's, aerial. And, some graphics that go on behind things that they create, though, not we've gone on the internet and everything is Creative Commons and all I did was plonk it on a page. So that's where I would go with simple. Logo, cool, design a logo, but it goes onto a poster as well. So, you're starting to get a little bit more depth to it. You've got to remember level 6. So if you think that your year 9s or 10s could do this, then you've probably not got the depth required. I think I've covered everything. So I've got a disclaimer. We don't consider ourselves the experts. Okay, I definitely don't. But we share our practice to help support the community, you guys. It's my take on the information that we have available from NZQA, plus lots of conversations I've said with my awesome colleagues alongside the students' experiences. So really looking at what they're doing and what that has led to. We do work hard. We work really hard in our department. We reflect on our own practice and we continuously make changes. And so you may not get those results you're after if you don't do the same. You can watch this video, but if you don't go and, implement and look at your own practice, then, you probably will end up with similar results this year. Right, Q&A. Okay, so hopefully if you jotted down a question, you've ticked it off and I don't have to answer anything. But feel free to either write in the chat a question. Yep, Steve's checking the chat.
Already. Could they use an image from Creative Commons to edit it? Just one moment before you start asking those questions, if it's okay. I'd just like to mihi to you both for the incredible amount of work and the rest of your team in presenting this for us today. We are going to stop the recording, and I just wanted to give that mihi for those people who are watching, just how lucky we all are to be able to get an insight into the hard work that is going on, and like you say, the privilege of having so many people to bounce ideas off. I'm sure there's a lot of people around the motu that are by themselves and would love to have just one more person to chat to, and that's what DIT is going to try and provide this year. But just, yeah, huge mihi. I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to carry on with Q&A, and we will close with karakia as well. But yeah, I just wanted to say that.